Okay, my name is Steven, and this is Sean, this is Tricia, and we're going to talk a little bit about our design project today. We looked at designing a gas pump interface. Just a little background on this. Back at the beginning of the semester, when we were thinking about what do we want to redesign, one day I just happened to be getting gas, and it's January in Iowa, so it's like 5 degrees and really cold and windy. And I get out, and I'm standing at the pump, and I'm trying to figure out, looking at this little black and white drawing, which way to put my credit card into the slot so I can get my gas. I'm sitting there looking at it. Maybe it's just me, but I couldn't figure it out. So I'm freezing there, and I'm thinking, why can't somebody just draw a design on that makes sense to me so I can just put it in and get on? So the businesses are losing money, and also errors and confusion take up a lot of the employees' time to try to fix it. Another reason why we think this is an important design space is what we found when we went out and looked at different gas pumps is that bad usability is extremely prevalent on gas pump interfaces. We looked at a number of different gas stations in the area, pretty much most of the main different providers. And I'm going to highlight some of the best of the bad design that we found. We got some pictures. One of the most common problems was having small screens. And as you can see on this, the screen, it gives you the instructions right here. That's pretty small compared to the rest of it. This station was particularly bad because that screen has scrolling instructions, and you can only read about half a word at a time. So the user has to stand there and wait for the instructions to scroll by, and it takes a long time. Here's another good example. A lot of pumps have poor instructions on them. This one here says push button to select fuel grade, which is fine. The problem is when you actually looked at the pump, there was no button to push. You were just supposed to take the nozzle out, stick it in, and turn it on. So there's a worthless instruction there. Also, this is a very, very typical picture. A lot of pumps are just completely cluttered like this one. They've got stickers, warnings, instructions, everything else you can imagine, and they're all just kind of spread out. And it just makes it confusing for the user. If they're trying to find specific information, they don't know where to look because it's all over the place. It just kind of creates a big mess. Another thing that happens a lot that's kind of related to clutter is extra buttons. You've got 4 buttons here and 4 buttons here. These buttons never actually get used. You just use these 4. In fact, you only use the 3 out of the 4 on this side. So it's just pointless stuff that they put in there that causes more clutter and more confusion. Here's an interesting problem, but on this pump and a few others we saw the pump numbers. So if you're going to go pay inside and tell them what pump it is, this is the actual pump, and the pump numbers are way up here. And you don't really notice them at first. It's good for the attendants because they can look out and see which pump you're at, but you have no idea. So it makes it very inconvenient for the users on that. This is actually my personal favorite one that we found. This gas pump has a color scheme. Each one of the grades has a color associated with it, green, silver, and gold, which is fine. But up here where the prices are, there's also another color scheme for those, but it's completely different colors. So it's like there was no thought that was put into that.
But first we wanted to go to the users. So the reason for going for a user-centered design is so that the design can be a true reflection of what the user really needs in a gas pump interface. And only by understanding the current situations and problems for current gas pump users are we able to lay down an improved foundation for a better design. And so to understand the current user, we have executed an interview process where we observed users in a real-world environment, and the observation took place at a Swift Stop fuel station where we interviewed 3 users while pumping gas. The types of questions asked to the users were, what problems do you experience at the pump? What would you change? And we also asked the users if there was any other additional information that they'd like to provide. During the interview process, we really wanted to have an unstructured interview, so to create a more casual conversation and a less intimidating environment. So the results from our interviews brought us to the conclusion that gas pump users are not exactly sure what they are unsatisfied with about the current system, And as an example, we interviewed an older man at Swift Stop that made a couple of errors. He inserted his credit card wrong, was very hesitant about which step to go to next, and would have to lean into the screen in order to read it. So when I asked him, what would you like to redesign about this interface, he said, well, it works pretty slick. So even though he had problems, he wasn't quite sure what he would change, and I think that's because it hasn't been redesigned in a while, so once you get used to it, you can't really imagine what to make different. So this is where we come in, and through observation, we'll need to decide and make changes and decide where to enforce better usability criteria so we can come up with a more efficient design. Before I go on to the design improvements, the design improvements most needed to create a more effective gas pump are features such as having a larger screen, such as like an LCD screen that is larger, brighter, more visually satisfying, and something that you, like versus the smaller dim screens that you can hardly read. Also having a more visible start screen where the user actually has to push a start button to start the process, just to be more involved with starting rather than driving up and just trying to guess if you've started or not. Also clearer instructions, going back to the example of the older man having to lean in just to read. If you had something bigger, it could be more clear to read. And also having the pump numbers on the screen itself can reduce the field of vision to more of a centralized location at eye level, so that you're not searching around for the pump numbers right before you go into the gas station to pay. And that would be less searching for the user, so less effort, less time. The last design feature to be improved would be the tactile feedback from pushing a button. Having that confirmation of a push button that depresses will give the user more satisfying feedback rather than pushing a flat button where you hope to actually depress the middle. And so to evaluate these design improvements as a whole functioning interface, we tested our classmates by using a paper prototype. The paper prototype consists of individual sheets of paper with each sheet representing one screen of the interface. What is chosen on one screen determines which subsequent screens will come up next, and this can be described as the Wizard of Oz method. The paper prototype is a low-fidelity prototype, and here's an example of our prototype in action. Sean, do you say about testing process?
First of all, on developments, the three main tasks of our project consisted of fueling, payment, and receipt. During the fueling task, you are required to remove the nozzle, stick it in your car, turn it on, maybe flip a little kickstand-like thing in the pump, keep it going. The payment process involves selecting a payment type, actually paying, whether that be with a card or inside. And finally, the receipt process involves selecting whether or not you want a receipt. And if you do, then actually taking the said receipt and pocketing it or whatever. Finally, we have the users rate the design with another questionnaire. We use this process in order to get a better sense of what the users thought of our design, make any minor improvements they might have noticed that we forgot or didn't take into account. There. We have a graph representing a number of our answers, depending on how they rate our interface and how they compare to other interfaces. Future development we've already taken into effect. First here we have is the original start screen, and a lot of users had a tendency to push this button here, which isn't actually a button so much as this, the starting screen, rather than the OK button up here. So we decided to change it just a simple thing. And to leave you on a lighter note, here are some examples of how even the best designs can still be subject to user error.